Yeah. Yeah, this is called Around the NFL. You start this great, by the way. You start this like a real, like, old school radio pro. And I say that in a compliment.
So
You're just like, hey, this is the headline of the story. This is football. I'm Kevin Clark. Let's go.
when we started this, they were like, "What do you want the music to be?" Because they would send it to the jingle
Yeah.
guy, and I was like, "I want it to sound like early '90s NFL films.
Yeah,
Like
it
I want
does.
it to be that. I want it to sound like that. Like Steve Sable is about to come on and be like, "Let me tell you about John Randall."
It's great. I really
Yeah.
like it.
All right, let's just start. I think we
Yeah.
started 30 seconds ago, but Nick Wright is here, host of the What's Right podcast, Fox Sports One. I think one of the smartest takesmen we've got in this industry. Are you
Oh,
offended by the term
thanks.
takesman?
No, I'm honored by it.
Okay.
I mean,
Some people are like, "Oh, I don't do takes."
no, of
I
course
don't
I do
know.
takes.
I know I
Like, I
don't.
think
Some
I've
people think they're above.
no.
Some people, it's like musicians, where it's like, no, 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 no. I'm not
Yeah,
really.
no,
Like,
I'm offended by the people who think they're above it. Like
yes,
if we were talking international politics or Middle East policy, I think there's probably not the time and the place for takes. But if we're
yep,
talking whether or not Brock Purdy should win league MVP, you know what that conversation needs? Some strong, well thought out, well
yep.
defended takes. And so yeah, and I am just blessed and very grateful that so many of my colleagues are so afraid of paying the brutal price of a take one day being wrong. And that price is, of course, nothing at all. And because of that, everything is just tepid nonsense. I
Yeah,
shouldn't say everything, but a lot
yeah,
of it. So listen, I think you've known me long enough to know I watch everything.
yeah.
I like to think I'm very
Agree.
well read and researched, so I have a real foundation, and then I have these strident opinions that annoy people at times. But yeah, I'm a takesman. I like my
Everybody's like,
take.
"Well, I'm a hot take guy," which normally I don't. I think there's a lot of people who are not hot take guys who give great takes. I think when people say I'm not a hot take person, it's sort of the prelude to giving an incredibly boring take. I'm not a
Yeah.
hot take guy unless they're doing the I'm not a hot take guy, but and then they give a hot take,
Well,
which is
yeah,
great.
that's the old cop out. The old cop out.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorites. When someone says something they really want to say but are kind of afraid to,
Yeah.
they will then be like, "All right, hold on a second." One of my,
Yeah.
I shouldn't say afraid. A guy who I think is great and does great work, Ethan Strauss. He
Okay.
used to do this bit where he called it Radio
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ethan, and I felt like this is who you want to be. You just don't want to step into the cauldron, but you want to be. So people will be like, "Oh, now I'm gonna sound like one of those TV talking heads." I'm like, "Hey, I'm one of those TV talking heads. First things first, 3 to 4:30 on FS1. You can watch it whenever you want. Uh, and it's fun. It's good. And you know what? We're talking about the sandbox of life, so it's fine.
I love that. All right, we're gonna start here. So on the football part of it, um, I played a game the other day on Twitter, and I was too generous. I said if you had to put all of your life savings on 4 teams win the Super Bowl, you win. If one of those 4 teams wins the Super Bowl, you lose everything. If 28 other teams win, I
I
was way
read the
too generous.
replies.
It should have been 3. It should not have been 4. But I was still interested to see where most people went with that. How many people had the Bills
Well,
and the Browns on there? But I think everybody in America goes Ravens, Niners, and then there's a
y-
third team. Go
so
ahead.
here's the reason I thought you did 4. Because I thought everyone in America would do Ravens, Niners, and then you have to, as the third team, have Kansas City.
That's
Just by
exactly my question. That's exactly my
so,
question because
I
most
knew
people did
that's where
not
you
do
were
that.
going. That's what I'm saying because I read the replies. Because, like I said, I
Yes.
prepare, and I'm like, Kevin might bring this up on the podcast. Um, and I was shocked and appalled
Yeah.
how many people. And I am not trying to sit here and act like Kansas City has bathed itself in glory this year. Right at the beginning of the season when they were winning, but it didn't look right. I was saying on TV that I thought they were essentially using some of the games as practices. Like, let's try to
Yes.
get this guy involved. Let's do this. But then once you start losing games, once all of a sudden you're fighting for seeding. You go into week 17 with the division not locked up. You can't say they're practicing anymore. They do have real issues. And I think the issues stem from three things. One is, I think the offensive line has been overrated because the guard center guard combo is
Yes.
great, but the tackles have not been good. I think the second one, which is the most obvious one in the world, catching. Just catch the ball, please,
Catch
more.
the ball.
And I think the third one that people are afraid to say, but I think is fair, is that the Chiefs are built around the idea that they are going to have a superhero at quarterback. And
Yes.
Mahomes has been very good this year. He's been better than his numbers, but he has not been consistently apex predator Mahomes. And I think that if we're doing Madden ratings, the Chiefs are built as if they have a 99 and the second best quarterback is a 93. And if Mahomes is a 91, I don't think the offense is good enough. So those are the three reasons. With all that said, the idea that anyone would be like, you know what? I trust Detroit more or Dallas or any of these other teams
That's
is
the people said the Rams.
and by the way, I might have the Rams fourth if I
Okay.
were doing my four. I'd probably have Dallas, but I think the Rams are an interesting one. But you have to have Kansas City three because at its fundamental level, they are a team that is not good, that is going into the playoffs without any A plus contributor out with injury, that has the best defense, even if it's not the second best defense in the league, like the numbers say, they have it the best defense the Chiefs have ever had, and a
Yep.
quarterback who is not only the most prepared, experienced, but also the best. And so, for all those reasons, that has to be your three. Four is interesting. I don't, and I hope we get into it. I do not buy Buffalo at all, and I know I sound
Mm.
like a broken record on that, but and I know they've won four in a row, but Buffalo's last two games have been awful performances. Awful. The Easton Stick game, and then trying the fact that they didn't beat the Patriots by 40 when there were four straight turnovers inside the 30-yard line. I never seen anything like it. So the idea that Buffalo is just going to rip off four straight, they have to play great in four consecutive games to make the Super Bowl, because this week's a
Mm-hmm.
playoff game. And nothing is more perfect 2023 Bills than the scenario of when you're the 2 seed, lose, you miss the playoffs entirely. And so I think, gun to my head, it's
Yeah.
Baltimore, Kansas City, San Francisco, Dallas, with the Rams being lurking as the fifth.
Sure. I disagree on there being three causes for the Chiefs, because if they had a receiver who could catch, if MVS could catch 4% more of the ball is thrown at him, the Eagles touchdown being a prime example, we'd say the Chiefs are getting away with this. It's fine. Everything is fine. And if you were to give Brett Veach and Andy Reid a trade and say you're going to have the worst receiving core in the league, but Mahomes is going to have the youngest, most talented defense he's ever had, and that's going to continue. And all of them, a bunch of guys are going to be on rookie contracts, all that stuff, except Chris Jones. And we'll see how that goes. They would take that trade 1 million times out of 1 million times. It's just that MVS is so catastrophically bad at catching the football. They lead the NFL in drops that it invalidates everything they're able to do. They are so close to being able to get away with this fully and completely. But MVS is literally, I've never seen a less
And
valuable player on a good team.
so, I don't know if you saw either the reaction in the moment or the tweet I sent, but in the game this weekend, when they had the, I think it was a crosser, MVS,
Yep.
Mahomes threw it a tiny bit behind him, and MVS dropped it. MVS showed him up. And that, to me, was worse than any of the drops. It was such, I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but a betrayal. Because
Yep.
Mahomes, after the Eagles game, Mahomes said, when he had the drop, Mahomes said, I could have thrown it a little bit better. And it might have been the
Yep.
most perfect pass thrown in the NFL all year. And he was like,
Yep.
I could throw it a little bit better. Mahomes has been protecting these guys. Mahomes has attacked the offensive line at times out of frustration. He's attacked the refs. He's lost Kelsey has attacked every piece of equipment out there, all because I think they want to support the wide receivers and not add to the noise. And MVS being like, hey, buddy, throw it better, was I tweeted, I was like, that to me is more benchable than the drops. And this to me is why they're either going to win or lose the Super Bowl. And that sounds silly. The drive after the next, the very first play, Mahomes throws a bomb to MVS down the
Yeah,
sideline. Now he drops that too. It wasn't as bad of a drop, but he drops it. And the fact that Mahomes won't freeze these guys out and will
yeah,
just keep going to them, maybe it's bad. Brady would talk about how he would freeze guys out. Maybe though, like, because all it does take is one great play in a big spot, and you feel like it was all worth it, so to speak. And I do think, and I'm curious your opinion on this, and then I'll stop ranting.
no,
Apologies.
that's great.
How much of because it's Tony and MVS that are the
Yeah,
guys who have the A1 droppers. Sky Moore as well to a degree, but Sky Moore's
sure,
just it's Veach, I think, has done a really good job. That's a bad pick, whatever.
sure.
MVS saved their ass in the playoff game last year. It was either I think it was the Bengals game where
Yeah,
every
Bengals
receiver
game.
was hurt except for him. And Tony had, I think, the second biggest play of the Super Bowl in the punt return. And I wonder, and maybe it shouldn't be this way, do these guys have this extended rope, these two players specifically, because en route to a championship in calendar year 2023, they both had huge contributions. So because of that, they don't want to just throw them aside.
I don't know if that. I think that there's no Joe Flacco of receivers. I think it'd be really hard to go out and just sign some guy off the street and say, "All right, you're gonna get reps here."
Every
And
time I
also,
see
like,
Larry Fitzgerald, I'm like, come on, man, you don't have a Super Bowl. Like, you've got to be in
also,
good shape.
what's funny is I've talked to Veach about this that not everybody can play with Mahomes because of the improvisation that happens. You have to be really fast because he can throw the ball really quickly down the field. He can get rid of the ball really quickly and push the ball down the field. So you have to. There's a certain threshold of speed, which is maybe not just sitting around at home, which I think is important to note here.
Sure.
The 4-4 guys are not exactly sitting around in Phoenix waiting for a call. They're already on rosters. So I don't know if it's anything but they don't have any other options. And Mahomes probably thinks he can make this work. I mean, like, these guys are Ringo Starr. Like, and that's what's funny to me about what you said about MVS showing him up. Like, if you're in a band and some guy keeps writing hits that make you $30 million a year, like the drummer in U2, you're just gonna be like, "This is great. No, I'm good. I'm good with whatever you want to do. Yeah, you want to go? Do you want to go to the restaurant? Yeah, I'm good with that. Go ahead." And I just think that that's at some point going to come to a head, but it's like a Chekhov's gun thing. At some point, either MVS will, as you said, make the play. I compared like the JD Drew thing. Do you remember this? JD
Yeah,
Drew
I
had the
was
worst, the worst
and hit a grand slam or
contract in Red
something.
Sox history. Hit a grand slam. Everybody forgot about the fact that he had a big contract. That to me is one thing can undo any
Yeah.
sort of legacy in a town. And I still think Mahomes is capable of literally, like, we've seen Mahomes. My favorite Mahomes plays are when he looks at a receiver and says, "I'm going to knock you down with this pass, and literally I'm going to throw it so hard that you are forced to catch it." Like, we've seen that kind of thing from Mahomes, and I think he's capable of that again. And
I
I think,
yeah.
go ahead.
No. I was just the other thing that I do think the Chiefs have going for them is I'm glad they're not alive for the 2 seed. In theory, you'd like it, but I'd rather them just sit everyone this week, and they're going
Yeah,
to. If you were alive for the back when the 2 seed had a bye, that's such an advantage. You've got to go for it. Now, when it's like if you were to get you don't know who is going to be the better matchup in 6-7 anyway. Yeah, you might be on the road in round 2, so be it. But the fact that Kelsey needs a week off more than just about any player in the league. I think that if the fact that they won, it wasn't the prettiest win, but they did move the ball against Cincinnati. It's not like they won the division because
yeah.
the Broncos lost and they lost, whatever. I would give yourself, a self-appointed bye for some of your key guys, try to reset, and then go into the playoffs and being like, the entire rest of the starting quarterbacks in this conference have one combined playoff win except for Joe Flacco for this postseason. Let's go see how we can do.
What would you do with the first overall pick? You're Ryan
You draft
Poles.
Caleb Williams.
Okay.
This is not a question. It's not a question. You draft the are you the you are in a world where my kind of counterintuitive quarterbacking take when I heard Brady and others and people say that, quarterbacking has gotten worse. I don't think that's it at all. I think the top level quarterbacking has gotten so good that guys are not as patient as they would be otherwise with mediocre talents. And so because of that, you are guys who by year 7 would be fine. By year 3, they're out. You know what I mean? And so they don't get the development because everyone's chasing the ghost of Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, what people pretend Josh Allen is, all of these things, right? They're all chasing that. And because of that, you have to take Caleb because I like Justin. Justin will never be one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the league. And so I think what's good for the Bears is at this point, has Justin increased his value to where would New England give you the 35th pick and something else for him? Could you get a great second rounder and an additional sweetener?
Yeah.
So if you're New
Atlanta's
England and
second
it's
rounder.
like you got plenty of money, you draft Marvin and then trade for Justin. Atlanta is the obvious fit for Justin Fields. Now, I don't know, would they give you their first rounder? Probably not. But I appreciate and respect what he's done, but Caleb to me is a game changer. And so I think you obviously draft him. Obviously.
Okay. Couple of
You
things. Number one,
disagree?
no. I don't disagree. I think there's a couple of structural problems. I think that I would look to auction off the pick. I've said this a couple times,
Wow.
but I don't see the problem is the Panthers, who were the most desperate team in football, already gave up all of their picks. They gave all their picks to the Bears. So they've already fleeced them. So, and then the Commanders are picking second as of right now. We'll see what happens this week. But who's the desperate team? That we always say, we always use dumb hypotheticals like, oh, you have 5 first-round picks for this. Well, you have to have the team that is desperate enough for that. And when I look at that list, I don't see a team like that. The Giants at some point need to solve their quarterback problem. Well, the Mariners aren't going to do that. They're not going to mortgage their future for Caleb Williams. So I don't think they're going to get the value that we always think in these hypothetical situations that they could get. I think Justin Fields is an amazing flyer, as you said, for a team like New England, for a team like Atlanta, a team that needs to solve it. And I also think that you mentioned the thing about how everyone's chasing the ghost of Mahomes or Burrow. I think a lot of that's incompetence from GMs because they know they can't program a team to bridge that gap. And I think it's interesting, essentially, like if you look at college football, and this might be undone by Washington and the portal, but there's a stat that rattles around my head that every team that's won the national championship in the modern era, in the recruiting era, has had either 2 top 5 recruiting classes on their roster or a top 10 quarterback, like a top 10 draft pick quarterback. So a generational quarterback. So that would be, there's 3 of them: Cam Newton, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. So those are the 3 quarterbacks who are the exception to the top 5 recruiting class rule. Okay. And so, and maybe Michael Penix, maybe we're not going to undo this because Michael Penix might turn out to be one of those guys, but we'll put that aside for a second. But what I'm saying is that a quarterback, and our friend Colin Coward has said this before, quarterback is the deodorant. And so a lot of the times it's not even just we have to have this quarterback to win. It's we have to have this quarterback to save my job. Brett Veach can make and Brett Veach is a lot better GM than most people, but they can make massive mistakes and hide it. They have a gas station attendants at receiver this year, and they're going to get away with it, and they're going to win the division. And so I think a lot of it is playing a lottery ticket at quarterback and just hoping that everybody gets extensions from it. Like I think Steve Keim said this, I think it was on Fox, where he said if Nick Bosa is a better player than Kyler Murray, but if he had taken Nick Bosa, he would have gotten fired. If he did take Kyler Murray, he got an extension out of it. Any sort of promise at quarterback changes the tone of an organization, saves everybody's job. And so I think there's a default into just going ahead and saying take Caleb Williams, and I don't necessarily know if that's always a smart option.
I don't think it's always a smart option. I think Caleb has a chance to be a super duper star. I think he is a different than most typical number 1 overall pick quarterbacks. I'm not saying that because let's just pretend CJ went number 1 this past year.
Sure.
I think Caleb is a grade better than that, and CJ's awesome. So now by the way, I was wrong on CJ going into the draft. So maybe, and I'm not trying to downgrade what he's doing. There are you said, I wonder I was just trying to think while you were talking about
Yeah.
teams that if New England moves on from Belichick,
Yes.
would they trade the third and a few? Would it be enough for you to get the third overall pick and one future first rounder to go from 3 to 1? That wouldn't be enough for
No.
me. But if
No.
no,
I need 3 overall first round picks. Yes.
exactly. And so now the team that should do it but would never do it, the team that actually would make sense to do it is the Jets. Sorry, Aaron, you're going to be really upset. Of course they can't. They're but and that's because of, mass formation psychosis. But if they could, it would be smart. Sorry if I misquoted that. I'm not sure. Oh, I wasn't reading the YouTube comments. But go ahead.
So the one thing about the quarterback position, and I've heard smart people say this, that it's almost, and I don't want to unveil this take, but I'll soft launch it, as you say.
Yeah.
There's almost no such thing as a quarterback prospect. Like, look at Bryce Young. And the thing I always come back to, and somebody very smart said this to me one time, we always say everybody was an Andrew Luck type. Everybody is an Andrew Luck type or is not an Andrew Luck type. You know who wasn't an Andrew Luck type?
Andrew Luck.
Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
Because he got ruined by the team around him.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, I think when we talk about quarterback prospects, we're like, well, this guy can't miss. I'm going to tell you something. There are NFL teams who will really work day and night and be so bad
to make him miss.
And so I think a lot, when we talk about Caleb Williams, I still feel like he's got the same chances of being a star as anybody else. And any other generational. I do not think there's such thing as a can't miss quarterback prospect.
I think you might be right that anyone can be ruined, but I don't know that I agree. And I shouldn't say I agree, because I think you're not quite saying this. I think that some guys are way easier to ruin than others, and some guys are. I think Bryce maybe could have had a good rookie year, but needed the perfect circumstances under everything. And I think CJ maybe could have had a terrible rookie year, but needed the worst possible circumstances, because CJ's circumstances weren't great. I think D'Amico's awesome, and Bobby Slowick seems super sharp, but it's not like he had, a ton of offensive talent around him. That guy's a baller, though, and had won on a high level, and he's big and strong. As I get older, you want to know the most, people, when I was young, they're like, when you get older, you'll get more conservative. And that has not happened, actually. I've probably become, more left-wing in a lot of my feelings, except for when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. And that I'm basically Gil Brandt. Rest in peace. I'm like, you know what? Are you 6'3" or taller? If not, get out of here. I am such an old curmudgeonly man when it comes to evaluating college quarterbacks. I'm like, I don't need to watch you play. Let me see you. Let me see your measurables. I want arm strength. I want size. You're too little. And I'll be honest, I'm going to say one other thing. I also really care more than I used to about some of the press conference stuff when it comes to quarterbacks. That's where we'll mention for a second time. That's where our dear friend Colin's backward hack take. It's like, you know what? There's a kernel of truth to it. You know what, Colin? Like when I was 25, I laughed at you. Now that I'm almost 40, I'm like, you know what? The guy makes a good point.
So the one thing I've gotten more conservative on in football is toughness. Like lines and toughness. When I was a kid, like let's say college, I was always, because that was during the kind of analytics revolution. Something like, all right, we just got to pass the ball over the field, little yards per attempt. What's the problem? We don't need to win the yard. And now I'm just like, this team should take a guard third overall. And when you establish toughness up front.
At your previous spot, at the Ringer, when you would go on with Solak, who I think is brilliant. By the way, if Ben's listening,
let's not overdo it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
I'm kidding.
Shout out to him. If he's listening, I had Eric Mangini, who is a brilliant defensive mind and brilliant football mind. Like a guy that is into the new age numbers and stuff. I understand I had him read one of Solak's breakdowns, that has the tape stuff in it. And he was blown away. And then I told him, I was like, I think this guy's 23. He couldn't believe it. So shout out to Ben. But when I used to hear
that real quick, that happened with Thomas Dimitrov. I think when Thomas was still in the league, that he called me and was like, is this guy a coach? And I was like, no.
Yeah. So good on him there. But when I used to hear you go on there and you guys would argue about, it felt like it was often Mike Vrabel versus the Chargers coach who just got fired, Brandon Staley. And it felt like we're trying to soft launch the idea that teams that wins are not a team stat either.
They weren't soft launching it. They said it. I backed them into a corner. Yes. I backed them into a corner. And then they said it one day.
They did say, okay, that's what I thought. They were trying to be like, you know what? Wins.
They literally were like, wins. But it wasn't necessarily Staley. It was just anti-Vrabel.
And they were just rolling there. They were basically like the pretentious grad school student that was rolling their eyes at you like, oh, this guy thinks in the NFL winning games means something. And so
it reminds me, Greg Rosenthal said this, I think it was 2 summers ago, where he was just like, hey, the Saints seem pretty good at winning, which has now become underrated in the NFL. These teams that just go out and win 9-10 games a year, people are like, whatever, what can they do? Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
I was going to say, the press conference thing. So I used to make fun of Brandon Staley because for the first year, all of his highlights, all of his viral clips were in press conferences. It was never like, look at this amazing defense. So I used to say, like, if your best stuff's coming in press conferences, that's probably a bad sign.
Yeah.
You're talking away into something. In October of this year, someone very smart who's aware of that take sent me a text, just said, your press conference theory, watch Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts' top 10 moments of this year are, well, we learned a lot today, and I'm really proud of how much we learned.
I had a plan before anyone had an opinion. And so that is a bar, by the way. It is good. And that also falls into Colin's handsome quarterback line. The guy's great looking. All these things check the boxes. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was about to say, while wins are important, you know who they mean nothing for? The Eagles, because that team stinks, and that team's about to get rolled by Baker Mayfield in round 1, and I can't wait for it, not because I'm anti-Eagles, but because I like Baker. And the story on the Eagles is a couplefold. One is the defense stinks. The other is the sneaky storyline is maybe having the draft board just be the Georgia depth chart, maybe a little more nuance to it. I'm not saying you missed on everything, but maybe just a little more nuance. But the scary thing for the Eagles long term is, did they pay the aberration year? Like, you've got Jalen's football career, and there is 1 year he's looked like a top flight. And by the way, I would have done it too. I thought, I was so blown away by how well he played in the Super Bowl. And I do care about how he carries himself, all that. I also think the guy's hurt. Mm-hmm. Now, the Eagles clearly don't think he's hurt, because their go-to play is have the 21 other guys on the field all hit him from different angles. And so you wouldn't maybe do that if he's hurt. But their short-term issue is that is a bottom 4 defense in the NFL that we have just seen Drew Lock and Kyler Murray just cook up on game-winning drives. Their long-term concern is, do they have a good quarterback who is paid like one of the best in the league, which, I get Philly did, do that once before, but that guy wasn't good, and that guy was the worst press conference guy ever, so I'm not comparing him to that.
Tickets to the game, merch, meals at iconic restaurants, stays at Caesar's Palace. All this can be yours when you bet with Caesars Sportsbook. Win or lose, every bet earns reward credits, which you can redeem across the empire. Now, if you haven't started yet, use the code OMAHAFULL, and then place your first bet up to $1,250. If you win, great, you keep those winnings. But if you lose, you get your stake back as a bonus bet.
Lamar's going to win the MVP. He should.
Of course.
I wish there was a way for somebody, I haven't quite figured out how to phrase it, but somebody needs to, like political candidates used to buy out network minutes and be like, here's my message. Someone needs to do that for a 5-minute dissertation on, hey guys, I just want to make this very, very clear. either 18 of the league's teams are run by morons, or there was out and out total collusion. And we need to get to the bottom of which one it was, because this idea that, oh, no, you couldn't sign Lamar, they were going to match. Well, guess what? Then if you're Pittsburgh, that's great. If you're the Jets, Pittsburgh, or New England, who are competing with the Ravens to win championships or divisions or the conference, you know what you'd love for them to do? Match a contract they don't want to do. But set all that aside, Lamar's been awesome. I give him all his flowers, because now I'm about to knife the guy, and people are going to think it's in defense of the Chiefs. And it's not, but maybe subconsciously. I don't know. If he loses in his first playoff game and plays poorly, you know what's going to be coming to memes near you? A split screen where they cut the face in half, and it's going to be Lamar and James Harden. Tell me where I'm wrong. If he plays poorly and they lose their first playoff game, it is terrible for him that he's winning this MVP. Hottest take. Winning MVP might be the worst thing that ever happened to Lamar.
The first time or the second time?
This one. If he wins this one. If he wins this one and their playoff game goes just like when he won the first one.
I don't think they're going to lose their first playoff game.
I don't either. But
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
You don't think Cleveland might be able to go there and all of a sudden Joe Flacco's beating them?
Well, I don't want like Arthur Smith to be like, oh, thank God we didn't sign him.
No, I don't want
We're
that
vindicated.
either.
That's why I'm worried about this take now. Is that then like the guy, David Tepper is going to be like, we crushed it. Everything's fine. Just throwing a drink at random people.
But if that happens, it might not be fair. But people bring up, they're like, Peyton struggled early in his playoff career. Peyton's first 3 playoff games were bad. His 4th playoff game, he had 5 touchdowns and a perfect passer rating. His 2nd playoff game, he lit the Chiefs on fire in a game that the Chiefs didn't punt and they lost, because that was the Chiefs' playoff life before Mahomes. And then his 6th playoff game, the Patriots kicked his ass. We're not going to have a real context of a quarterback this good being 0 for 5 on playing good playoff games. And so it's just, and this is sports talk, manna from heaven, the old rest versus rust.
Yep.
The Ravens 2 weeks off, too much time. And so I'm interested to see it. I also think a Mahomes-Lamar AFC title game is our best possible outcome here. And I think that's what we're going to get. And I'm excited for it. But
I completely agree with you. We'll get you out here on this. If you could retire a take right now, like just zap it, for not yours, but just like remove something from the sports media. Great. Yeah, all yours are amazing. Yeah. But I'm saying, if you could say, all right, we can no longer debate blank in sports media. It is removed from the conversation across everything. It is illegal. Police show up at your house if you start to debate this. You can retire anything from sports media. What would it be? And it could be a broad thing or it can be a very specific thing. Just get it out of the discourse.
Wow. This is such a great question. I wish I'd have prepped this instead of your stupid pick 4 teams thing. The obvious one is Jordan versus LeBron. But then, come on, I'd be unemployed. Let's leave that one in there. I think in the contemporary moment, I think that Shanahan quarterbacks. It's been good for me professionally, and it will be good for me again when once again I get to be right, and there's all this tape of all my colleagues being like, I think this guy's the MVP of the league. Why can't he be Tom Brady? But it makes us all dumber. And the lack of self-awareness from some of my colleagues who were dying on this hill for Jimmy Garoppolo and then are like, no, it's so different. This guy processes so much faster. Like, okay. I do that is the old listen, just trust me, his anticipatory throws are better than you will admit. I Actually, yeah, and you know what? I take it back. I enjoy that conversation now that I think of it because I know that I get to be vindicated on it. I have to say one thing before we go.
Yeah.
I want to just shout out your great producer Flynn. I just want to make sure he knows that the industry's been talking about his transition in eyewear, and it's taken
Oh,
everyone by storm.
wow.
And
Wow.
so people are really happy for him, and that people are noticing, and it's an
That was the
upgrade.
buzz. I mean, when you were saying like what do we have to stop talking about in sports media? I was thinking about the Flynn thing because people
Yeah,
just can't stop talking about
people can't
the
stop
eyewear.
talking about it. They can't. So good
I
for
don't
him there.
know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he wants to chime in here or not. If he's probably a little too embarrassed. But
Maybe he's mad at me, but shout
yeah,
out Flynn.
possible. Shout out Flynn, Nick Wright. Shout out Flynn. Shout out Miles. Shout out Nick Wright. You can see him on FS1 First Things First. You can hear him on What's Right, one of my favorite podcasts. Even though I didn't, I know the Nick Wright. I just type in Nick Wright into Spotify and I just get all sorts of takes. You had a take about Shanahan quarterbacks a couple weeks ago about podcasting. The analogy was essentially, if you're a system podcaster and you go out and you have the greatest podcast in the world, I don't even want to get into it. The point is, listen to this podcast. Go ahead.
I appreciate that. Yeah, no. The Shanahan the take was that because I do my podcast with my son,
Yes.
and I was like, hey, man, if all of a sudden, you left and your sister came in and the podcast numbers don't go down at all, maybe you weren't the key. And he got upset with me because that's literally what happened over the summer. Well, and he's like, so are you saying I'm Brock Purdy? I'm like, yeah, but that's not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to win MVP of the podcast realm. This podcast is great. And I appreciate the fact that you get right to business on it. And you're not wasting my time. Like so many other podcasts in the beginning.
I got no time to waste. Nick Wright, thank you so much, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.